A disturbing wave of racist hate crimes against Indians has rocked Ireland, with several brutal, unprovoked attacks reported in recent months. Victims include a 6-year-old girl assaulted outside her home, professionals targeted by teenage gangs. The Indian Embassy has issued an advisory, a safety advisory, amid growing fear in the 90,000-strong Indian community. Many are blaming rising anti-immigrant sentiment fueled by Ireland's housing crisis. Protests and petitions have followed, demanding justice, accountability, as well as an end to racism. But for further clarity and for what's happening on ground zero, let's go across to Paul Murphy, who joins us from Dublin. Paul is a reporter with RTE. Thanks so much, Paul, for making time for us. What's behind this sudden spike in these attacks? Is there a larger pattern or trigger that authorities are looking into?
Well, there's been a broader increase in these hate crimes targeting immigrants. Up until sort of early July, a lot of the ones that would have come to attention, and most of them come to attention via social media, they would have involved attacks on asylum seekers, and also sometimes, attacks on immigrants who aren't asylum seekers. But then from July, we had a spate of these attacks. Now, An Garda Síochána, which is the Irish police force, they say that there hasn't been a significant jump in attacks focused on Indians who are resident here. But what is absolutely true is that there have been some quite high-profile attacks in terms of just abuse and also in terms of physical assault, including one very nasty one which happened last month in Dublin, where a man was slashed and he was attacked and he was rounded on and he was racially abused. And there have been other incidents. Now, some of the incidents don't have an explicitly racial motive, but they have targeted Indians who are living here. So it's unclear in those cases whether they are, a regular run-of-the-mill assault, if you like, that could happen to anybody, or if they are explicitly racist. But certainly some of the attacks have been racist, and that's, it's very worrying for the government. It's very worrying for law and order, and also principally it's very worrying for Indians who live here, which make up a sizable section of the immigrant community in Ireland. The census in 2022 showed that Indians were the third largest group of non-Irish living in Ireland. So there are quite a few estimates would suggest maybe around the 80,000-90,000 level at the moment of Indians who are either living and working here or studying here.
Paul, is there any political factor behind these attacks that have taken place in the recent months?
Just on the aspect of whether, the part of the reasoning behind the attacks is that immigrants are coming to take our jobs. I mean, that if that logic exists, and I don't believe that it does exist to any serious extent here, that argument, it's an argument that makes no sense. I mean, Ireland at the moment is close to full employment. That's one thing. Another thing is, as the Minister for Justice, Jim O'Callaghan, recently pointed out, most of the attacks are done by teenagers. So these are kids who are not working. Typically, they're in school, or they should be in school. And so they're not about to enter the jobs market. Also, the typical Indian working in Ireland is typically very, very well educated. The median income is higher than it is for Irish people and for other immigrant groups. So it's not as if the people who are attacking Indians would in any way be competing against them, because most of the Indians, for example, will either work in the sciences, healthcare is a very big one, and information technology. So these are not A, there's full employment anyway, B, the people who are doing the attacking aren't of working age, and C, it's highly unlikely that they would have the educational qualifications that the Indian immigrant working in these sectors would have. So that direct competition doesn't really come into it. I think where there is an issue is this politicization. We don't have a far right group in Ireland at the moment of any political significance. In the recent elections, which were council elections, we don't have any far right somebody espousing anti-immigrant views in our Parliament, in either our Senate or our lower house of Parliament, which we call the Dáil. And we don't have in the councils, there's the guts of 700 councillors around Ireland. There was elections recently, and very few, much less than 10 of those who were elected would have these hard right anti-immigrant views. But what we do have is, I suppose, the spread of a sort of a political tendency, which is, a lot. In many ways, Ireland looks towards America more than the country would look towards Europe, and so that influence of where the highest echelons of American political power, as we all know, there's a lot of discussion about immigrants in a very negative way. That immigrants are often portrayed as being illegal immigrants, and then some of that spreads over to immigrants who aren't illegal, and they're being portrayed as illegal immigrants are being portrayed as people who are more likely to be involved in criminality. And there's a constant reiteration of this negativity. Now, in Ireland, as I say, that level of public political discourse in an anti-immigrant fashion hasn't taken hold yet. But what is quite possible is that discourse on social media has spread over. So young people who are maybe disenchanted, disenfranchised, or just looking for a bit of trouble find it easier to target people because they have somehow inhaled this nasty political rhetoric, which is driven in part by people who are extreme right in Ireland, but as a political grouping, they're very, very few, and they wouldn't really have much influence. Where it's problematic, these attacks are problematic, is they're problematic for firstly problematic for the country, because our society, our economy relies heavily on immigrant labour, and also in particular the health system relies very, very heavily on Indian nurses. So for the last most recent figures that we have over a 12-month period, 52% of all newly registered nurses in Ireland had trained in India, and that compared to just over 20% of those who had actually trained in Ireland. So there's a huge reliance on Indian nurses in particular to keep our health system alive. It causes a problem for obviously, these attacks cause a deep problem. They cause a lot of unease within the Indian community, and they also cause a problem in terms of law and order, because, as I mentioned, a lot of the attacks are carried out by young people. And in Ireland, we have, under the Children's Act, the imprisonment of children, so anybody under 18, is something that is an absolute last resort. So normally, if a child breaks the law, they go through this junior liaison process, and so they don't end up with a custodial sentence. In fact, typically they don't end up with a criminal conviction at all. So it's a difficult, when the perpetrators are under 18, it makes it very difficult for the police and for the system of justice to deal with them. Now, they have recently introduced laws which, when hate or when racial hatred or ethnic hatred is an element of a crime, so when somebody's being assaulted and racial insults are being used, that they recently introduced legislation just from the start of this year. It's being implemented, where in some cases penalties are being doubled. So, for example, under the previous public order law, if you, for threatening or insulting or abusive behavior in a public place, you could be sentenced to a prison sentence of up to 3 months. That has been doubled now. So if there's a racial element, that can be doubled for up to 6 months. So there have been other laws on assault. Also, if there's a racial element to it, the sentencing and the imprisonment potential penalties have been increased substantially.
Paul, thanks so much for joining us.